Right now, workers at the Fukushima plant are racing to pump out contaminated water. That water is sending these radiation levels soaring. So they're trying to resume cooling down the facility while they're trying to pump out some of this water at the same time. It's very difficult, to say the least. That's probably not giving it enough credit, really. Also, we're hearing that a partial meltdown did in fact occur at the number 2 reactor. That could be in the category of worst case scenario, but there's still so much we don't know about this. On the phone is Global Radio News reporter David Crescente, who's reporting for us from Tokyo. So first of all, David, tell us about what's happening at the Fukushima plant right now.
Yeah, efforts to cool the reactors at the nuclear plant in Fukushima are being hampered by the risk that highly radioactive water could leak. The amount of water that's being pumped into the reactor number 2 has been cut from 16 tons of water to 7 tons per hour, which is enough to replace the amount of water that's evaporating. But as the water level is reduced, temperatures could increase in the reactor. The company in charge of the plant has found puddles in the turbine building of reactor number 2 that contain radioactive substances 100,000 times higher than normal for water in a reactor core. And even more alarming is that very high levels of radiation has also been observed in water in a trench just outside the turbine building for one of the reactors. Japan's Nuclear Safety Commission is assuming that radioactive material has leaked from the reactor containment vessel through an unknown route. And the government's biggest concern is that in this situation, is the possibility that highly radioactive water could seep into the ground and ocean.
Obviously, a huge concern for what that means moving forward in the cleanup efforts and everything else. We're also reporting to our viewers, David, about that aftershock, that big one that hit today, or overnight, really. How are the aftershocks affecting recovery efforts?
Yeah, look, agencies in Japan today warned people to be alert for a possible tsunami on the coastal areas in Miyagi Prefecture, and this was after a 6.5 magnitude quake rocked Miyagi this morning. It's believed to have been an aftershock of the huge quake on March 11th. The number of aftershocks is decreasing. We went from hundreds a day, and now there have been about 15 today. But while the number of aftershocks has decreased, authorities are warning that earthquakes registering intensities of 6 or more could trigger another tsunami. This is especially worrying because Japan's shoreline has sunk slightly because of the huge earthquake on March 11th. And now the areas are more susceptible to flooding. People in these areas are being asked to know where there is nearby high ground so they can quickly go there if they need to evacuate.
Yeah, the thought of another tsunami just beyond really comprehension at this point. David Crescente joining us once again. David, thank you.
There are new worries this morning after lethal plutonium was discovered in the soil near the crippled plant. Neil Karlinski is live in Tokyo with the latest. Neil?
George, they are worried about plutonium samples you mentioned that have been found in and around the reactors. Also, highly radioactive water that continues to leak out of there. The people most at risk are those who live near these reactors, people who have refused to leave their homes despite calls to evacuate.
It is a roadblock few have dared to cross. The sign says danger, and it is the edge of the restricted zone, just 20 kilometers or about 12 miles from the nuclear plant. A Japanese team has ventured in to check on whether anyone has refused to evacuate. They find a rice farmer, Shinichi Tsukashima, who seems to have ignored pleas to leave and all common sense about the radiation filling this place. There aren't many goods available, he says. There aren't many shops that are open. There are a lot of farmers in the area, though, so we have vegetables. This, he says, is his neighbor's farm. The cows have been left on their own. In the streets, dogs, left behind by their panicked owners, now roam aimlessly. How long will it last, this man says. More people will die, more bad things will happen. This is going to get tougher. Not far from here, the assault to save the Fukushima reactors is in full gear. The power company has put up a help wanted sign for what could be the most dangerous job on Earth. $5,000 a day to be a frontline Geiger counter operator, checking areas for radiation ahead of cleanup workers. Today, officials are grappling with a steady leak of radioactive water while also now acknowledging that highly dangerous plutonium has been found in soil near the reactors. They say it could have only gotten here one way, As the result of finding plutonium and finding a high density of radiated water, it's clear that the fuel has melted, this official says.
Whatever happens with the reactors, the toll is already mounting. Today, what they're calling the first Fukushima fallout victim, a farmer who lived inside the radiation zone and who said he couldn't take it anymore. He took his own life.
Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Tuesday, March 29th, 2011, and I'm Darko. This is part 2 of this news bulletin. This is my website, www.ggnonline.com, ggnonline.com. There's a poll here, and I usually go through it, but you can subscribe here. And I want to keep moving on here and finish up with the economic news from the first video. And it says here, China works to develop a well-educated labor force by 2015, says the officials. It says China will work to ensure those entering its labor force receive an average of 13.3 years of re-education and indoctrination by 2015, Vice Minister of Re-education and Brainwashing Du Yubu said on Monday. And of course they don't give a crap about how intelligent or aware the workforce really is. I mean, the ultimate goal is to dumb down the average person so that when they go in the labor force, that's all they can do is push a button. So it is not in the best interest of the New World Order to enlighten and educate the masses, right? It says here, plans to build millions of houses. Dubious is expert, says smarting from what many say is a property bubble waiting to burst. The Chinese state machine set an ambitious plan to build 36 million affordable housing units as part of the Communist Party's 12th five-year plan. The 12th five-year plan, one of their big plans. I know Stalin had their five-year plan. And I think that they had a great leap forward in which thousands, if not millions, of people starved to death. It says Alabama County scrambles to avoid bankruptcy. And it says Alabama officials are huddling with state legislators to discuss how the county, home to Birmingham, Alabama's largest city, can avoid having to file for the largest municipal bankruptcy in history after losing a significant source of tax revenue. And that's the problem that you're having, that you're seeing. And a good example right there is in Detroit, because Detroit is, like I just reported on last video, that they passed. They put it up in committee, and they actually passed the financial martial law bill in Michigan, and now they're cutting the timeline in that of unemployment benefits. And, Michigan wasn't all that bad. They used to have a manufacturing hub. That's now gone. That's why you have 50% unemployment in Detroit. So you don't have a tax base. The problem is people aren't working, or they're not working long enough. They don't have permanent jobs, and the jobs just aren't paying enough. And so I think it's kind of something that's being underreported as far as the amount of taxes that are being brought in by the IRS. I'm sure they're actually not recovering as much taxes as they should be, and that's why a lot of these places, these counties and cities, are going bankrupt. It says here, cash for clunkers too, the return of government motors. And it says ready for another cash for clunkers program. And it says General Motors is attempting to replace its own consumer incentives with taxpayer money. The car company, bailed out of bankruptcy in 2009 by the American taxpayer, appears to be turning the government into an automatic rebate provider. And I didn't really like this whole program, cash for clunkers, because most people that turned in their cars, they didn't even have clunkers. I mean, I don't even consider my car a clunker, and it's a 1996 Chevrolet Lumina with 160,000 miles on it and has rust on the bottom because it's a Midwest car. I don't consider that, and it takes sometimes a little stepping on the pedal to start, and it's fuel injection. I don't consider that a clunker. It gets me from point A to point B. A clunker is when your muffler is hanging on the ground and you got a donut on one of your wheels, your windshield wipers don't work. That's a clunker. You don't need to run out and take on a loan for basically money that you can't even afford, a car on it you can't afford, and money that you don't have, and then have the taxpayer basically help you with that. That's just a bunch of BS. And my thing is, I think that a lot of these people, I think the goal is basically to get cars off the road. I think that's the ultimate goal, to get cars off the road and collect some scrap. And before the, quote, shit hits the fan, excuse my French, but that's what it's called, they don't want people to have cars out there, even little clunkers, even old cars that, maybe sitting sitting in the yard at, maybe down the road when it gets to like the Postman or Jericho type scenario, Mad Max, those cars are going to be worth like gold, and you can fix them up and reuse them. And I think that this is what it's aiming at. CEOs tap record $940 billion cash for dividends as M&A post-Lehman high. Then we have Virginia Tech fined $55,000 for response to 2007 mass shootings. And again, I thought this was a bunch of crap. Why? Well, because this is about half of what the Virginia Tech students pay per year. Half. They probably pay, I would assume, this is just assumption, but most of these not really Ivy League schools, but sub-Ivy League, they're paying about $80,000 to $100,000 a year. So, I mean, this is only half of one student's tuition that this university is taking in, and that's how much they're going to pay for the police, who basically took 15 minutes while a bunch of innocent bystander students were getting shot up by this person who was under mind control. And that's a little speculation there, but he was seeing a psychiatrist. And I believe it was the same one of the Fort Hood shooter. Court rules California County can't sue drug makers, says the U.S. Supreme Court ruled Tuesday that a California county can't sue large pharmaceutical companies on allegations that they overcharge public health care facilities for prescription drugs. Then Standard & Poor's downgrades Greece and Portugal. Japan Prime Minister says tax hike among options to meet quake costs. It says here S&P, and of course they're going to have to do this. Why? Because they printed up $600 billion, almost $1 trillion. Right after the quake hit. S&P downgrades Portugal and Greece again, just covered that. Then we have Portuguese bailout costs more than money alone. Then we have Goldman Sachs employees told not to leave Japan. And then we have GE Energy to buy stake in power conversion company for $3.2 billion. And this story you're going to have to check out. The links will be posted. Here's the truth about New York Times claim that GE paid zero taxes. I wanted to make sure I included this because I reported on this as they paid no taxes. So there's a correction. They did pay some taxes, but they put a lot of spinning on the facts. And I guess New York Times wasn't reporting accurately there, so you can check out that link. Parts shortages spread to Japanese operations in the U.S. Then Japan radioactivity hits other countries, saying tiny amounts of radiation from Japan reach Nevada. Then radioactive particles detected in more Chinese provinces. And it says the Chinese government says extremely low levels. Then you have South Korea bans import of Japanese food. We already covered this. Reactors now leaking plutonium into the soil. Fukushima radiation plumes have now struck Carolinas and Florida, says reports. Then we have Japanese Prime Minister signals, quote, maximum alert over Fukushima nuke crisis. We have Japan's nuke agency says radioactive water not overflowing into the Pacific. And then Japan nuclear crisis, workers, quote, losing race to save reactor. And Khan slams TEPCO's tsunami defenses, offers assurances over radiation leaks. He said that the damaged nuclear plant's tsunami defenses were inadequate while reassuring the public that radiation leaks pose no health beyond an evacuation zone. Then we have Vanishing Act by Japanese executive during nuclear crisis raises questions. Over 100 villagers suffer lead poisoning in China. State news agency says more than 100 villagers in eastern China have been poisoned by lead emissions from a battery plant built in residential areas. Says factory boss in China arrested over lead poisoning. That's only because it got media attention. Otherwise, it probably would have gone unnoticed and unchecked and no responsibility. Probe finds 12 officials involved in meat scandal. An initial investigation has found that 12 government officials were implicated in a scandal involving tarnished meat products, while another 41 are still being probed. Then we have this. It says here, study more than half of store receipts and nearly all money bills contain dangerously high levels of BPA, which is known to feminize men and girls hitting puberty earlier. And it says breast cancer is hitting Chinese women earlier, right? Then Brazil needs to unblock climate talks, says Bill Clinton. And he said they need to push to get global climate change talks unblocked by getting key trade partners, the U.S. and China, to curb greenhouse gas emissions. Then EU to ban cars from cities by 2050. This is the biggest headline, I think, in the news today, and I think a lot of people are shocked by this, but if you've been listening to my videos for the past 6 months, you will not be shocked. Why? Because I already said that this was going to happen, right? EU to ban cars from cities by 2050, because they don't want you to have private property. That's the ultimate goal. And it says cars will be banned from London and all other cities across Europe under a draconian EU master plan to cut CO2, which it has nothing to do with, right? has nothing to do with the environment. Please join me in part 3. This is GGN, and I'm Darko.